I was born in Nashville, Tennessee, at Hubbard Hospital, which was the hospital serviced by Meharry Medical College. Delivered by Dr. Meadows, who was a black doctor in Nashville, and that's an interesting kind of scenario. A lot of people were born at home in the South. My mother was born at home. And I lived in Old Hickory, outside the city, in a place called Hopewell. And Hopewell has its own interesting history. It was a segregated little enclave of colored people who lived there, and we lived in the back part of the community, but we were the bigger part of the community. And the front part were whites. My grandfather was a minister, and by all accounts was an itinerant minister. So the second and fourth Sunday he'd be someplace, and the first and the third he would be someplace. My grandmother was an original woman. She was, in fact, one of the founders of the church that I grew up in as First Baptist Hopewell. And even though it's expected that the wife would go with the minister husband, she said, Ed, I'm going to my church. You can go to your church. I'll show up on special days, and that's it. My father was one of two. It was him and his brother. They were both veterans of World War II, and my grandfather was a World War I veteran. The family is interesting because coming up, I used to notice that my grandfather was a little bit darker than my grandmother. No, than his sister, his sister. And they were ranged the gamut from looking almost white or looking white to my grandfather's color, which was medium dark. So I said, well, why do you all look all different? Now, I look different too, but that didn't, little kids never think of those kind of things. Well, in essence, the story goes that my grandfather was of Haitian descent, and my grandmother was of Irish. My great-grandmother was of Irish descent, and my great-grandfather was Haitian. So when she married my great-grandfather, she lived as a colored woman for the rest of her life, and as a result, we have this rainbow family. So coming up as a kid, being the granddaughter of the minister and others, and whatever, we had a certain position in this little colored community, but I was related to everybody, so I never could find a boyfriend. Now that's something. But the mechanic who fixed the car was a guy by the name of Ollie. And so he would call my grandfather uncle, which is a term in the South that people use for blacks, older blacks, uncle and auntie, even if they weren't related. And most whites would use that. Not sure if it was respectful or not. So he'd go, Uncle, what can I do for you? Talking to my grandfather. He says, well, I need the car fixed. So I thought he was Cousin Ollie for a long time in my life, until some of my other cousins said, girl, he ain't related to you. But I mean, so it's sort of that kind of deal. We also had the only tavern in the east side of the county, and the only American Legion in the east side of the county, where blacks could come and socialize after hours. So we had the two joints in there. So always a lot of people, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So it was sort of an interesting kind of life. They all knew who my father was. They all knew my uncle. And it was sort of an interesting kind of community where everybody took care of everybody else. We were always under somebody's cover or covering in terms of growing up. So that was it. The elementary school was in our neighborhood, so I walked to elementary school until I was in 8th grade.
Was it segregated school?
Segregated school, but it was a consolidated segregated school starting in 3rd grade. So we had, I think, 8 or 9 other small black communities that had children coming into the community. So the buses would roll in every day and we'd walk. So when people talk about neighborhood schools, I went to one. But at 9th grade, we got on the bus and rode the 25 miles to the colored high school.
25 miles.
25 miles, which meant I was on a bus from about 6 in the morning until just about 8, because you had to make all the stops to pick up the kids and everything else. And in the afternoon when we left, I think I got home about 4:30 or 5.
Now, was there a white school closer to your house?
Oh yeah, there was one. My mother was the cook at DuPont High School, which was about 5, maybe 7 miles from us. And there was another white elementary school no more than a mile from our house.
And you couldn't attend?
Could not attend either one of them.
Where your mother cooked, you couldn't go to that school?
No.